Just waiting for the go-ahead for our live. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. Before we begin, we'll stand for a word of prayer. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for today. We gather here under your care and your protection. Thank you for your loving kindness that never fails us. We thank you for those here with us. We ask that you guide our thoughts and our actions, and that everything we do would bring glory to your name. Strengthen us and fill us with your peace, I pray, in Jesus' name. Amen. Please be seated. Honorable Minister of Agriculture, Land, Housing and the Environment, Permanent Secretary within the Ministry of Agriculture, Land, Housing and the Environment, Heads of Sections within the Ministry of Agriculture, Land, Housing and the Environment, the Montserrat Community College students, the Montserrat Secondary School students and teachers, our guest speakers, participants who join us online. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. On the calendar, there are days, weeks, and months that mark different interests. For us, as GIS users, Geographic Information System users, that significant day is today. It is the third day of every, it's the third Wednesday of every November. So GIS Day is every third Wednesday in November. GIS provides an opportunity for users of geographic information systems to demonstrate real-world applications that are making a difference in our society. It's a day which allows us to have engagement, interaction, and discussions about the critical significance of spatial data and its analysis. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you to this year's GIS Day. We not only celebrate on Montserrat, but there are activities taking place around the world, and of course in the Caribbean. This year's theme is entitled Celebrating the GIS Professional. We look forward to hearing from our very own professionals on island, and we celebrate what they have been able to accomplish through the use of geographic information systems technology. GIS has become much easier to use and to access. It is becoming part of our everyday lives, and it rewards all those who interact with it, from data gatherers to leaders who have to make or break decisions. The power of a geographic perspective is important. It is my hope that by the end of today's forum, that you too will be compelled to become a GIS user. Once again, happy GIS Day and welcome to today's forum. We'll continue with brief remarks from our Permanent Secretary, Mrs. Beverly Menz.
A very pleasant good morning to all. I wish to respect the protocol and adopt the protocol that has been so well established. And I'm so happy to see all of you here this morning in your red. You really look lovely down there and eager and ready to go. Did you know that the concept of Geographic Information Systems, GIS, was initiated on Montserrat since back in 2001? Yes. Okay. 22 years ago, with the help of the United Nations Development Program, UNDP, and the Department for International Development, DFID, back then, the notion of utilizing GIS on Montserrat was brought to life. Noting the benefits that can be derived, the Ministry of Agriculture, Lands, Housing, and the Environment embraced the technology. Today, nestled within the Physical Planning Unit, the small but stalwart GIS team ensures continuous functioning, access, and updates to the Geographical Information System for Montserrat. The Montserrat GIS has since become an important tool and main source of data for most of the resource management, the environmental planning, and infrastructure development projects on our island. Montserrat's GIS data has been utilized widely in projects of vital importance in the rebuilding of the island. The Montserrat Volcano Observatory, the Disaster Management Coordination Agency, real estate agents, the Montserrat Tourist Board, Montserrat Utilities Limited, the Public Works Department, the Montserrat National Trust, and the Statistics Department have benefited significantly from this GIS. Projects such as the geothermal and solar projects, port development and hospital projects have also benefited from the use of the geospatial data. Today's GIS Day, the theme is so fittingly titled, Celebrating the GIS Professional. GIS professionals bring a unique set of skills that involve expertise in interpreting, contextualizing, and making decisions based on geospatial information. Today, we celebrate the GIS professionals within our ministry who have demonstrated commitment to promoting GIS awareness and education to students and citizens of Montserrat. We have our GIS manager, Mrs. Laverne Ryan, 20 years of service. Our GIS technician, Mr. Rondell Mead, 15 years of service. And we have our GIS apprentice, so we're doing succession, Mr. Kijon Kernan, 3 years of service so far. We also celebrate the teams at the Lands and Survey Department, the Departments of Agriculture, Environment, Fisheries, and Housing, who utilize this technology to make better decisions that affect us all. We are also very grateful for the partnership we have created along the way to enhance the work on island by collaborating with GIS professionals in regional and international organizations, those such as the Joint Nature Conservation Committee, JNCC, the Center for Environment, Fisheries, and Aquaculture, CFAS, United Kingdom Hydrographic Office, South Atlantic Environmental Research Institute, Waite Institute, and the Blue Halo Projects partner, and the Caribbean Natural Resources Institute, Canary. Today's panel of presenters are also GIS professionals in their own right, as they too utilize GIS data to make their work more effective and more efficient. I implore you, therefore, to listen closely and learn more on how they capitalize on the information provided by our GIS. I am sure that by the end of this opening ceremony, you would have had a sound understanding and a greater appreciation for the potential of GIS on Montserrat. I cannot close without extending very special thanks to Mrs. Laverne Ryan and her team, who go out of their way every year to highlight our geographic information system and ensure the involvement of professionals, the youth, and the wider community. Thank you. It is with great pleasure, therefore, that I declare this 2023 GIS Day open. Have a pleasant day.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Mans. We truly appreciate your support over the years, and we thank you for extending that appreciation to us. Thank you. Without further ado, we'll get into our guest speakers for today. We are excited to have a team of 6 persons who will present to us their work in GIS. Our first presenter is Lieutenant Colonel Alvin Ryan. He commenced his military career when he joined the Montserrat Secondary School Cadets in 1986. On the 4th of March, however, 2022, history was made when he was promoted to the rank of Lieutenant Colonel, the first officer of the Royal Montserrat Defense Force to ever hold such a title. Mr. Lieutenant Colonel Alvin Ryan is a qualified electrician, and he has worked at the Physical Planning Unit as an electrical inspector for over 10 years. He has put his skills to use within various humanitarian efforts which the Royal Montserrat Defense Force has deployed officers to Grenada after Hurricane Ivan in 2004. Lieutenant Colonel Ryan is the current director of the Disaster Management Coordination Agency here in Montserrat, and he is responsible for providing coordination for any large-scale man-made or natural hazards that we may encounter. I invite Mr. Ryan to the podium.
Thank you, Mrs. Ryan. Protocol having been so ably established, I would like to say good morning to everyone here and in the listening public. The theme celebrating the GIS professional is very apt for this year, as I have witnessed personally the birth of GIS within the Physical Planning Unit. And under Mrs. Ryan's direction and her team, it has grown from strength to strength to the point where I have no hesitation in referring to Mrs. Ryan as indeed a professional. I was asked to conduct a lightning talk, which luckily for me suggests that it should be quick and short, and to touch on 3 areas in particular. 1, to provide real-life scenarios, presently or in recent past, where I have applied GIS technology in work activities, and to discuss how GIS technology has helped in decision-making processes. And 3, to elaborate on how I see GIS being used futuristically in Montserrat in, of course, my line of work. Which one? Best you do it. Slideshow. A geographic information system, GIS, is a system that creates, manages, analyzes, and maps all types of data. Geospatial technologies such as geographical information systems and remote sensing emerge as critical navigational aids in effective disaster management. Natural and man-made hazards, impact, incidents, and emergencies can happen anytime, anywhere, and with little or no warning. Earthquakes, floods, fires, tsunamis, volcanic eruptions, landslides, and tropical cyclones are some of the natural hazards that could kill many people and destroy property and infrastructure every year. Geographical Information System, GIS, together with remote sensing data, can be used effectively and efficiently to assess the severity and impact of damage due to these hazards. GIS assists in all stages of disaster management, and if you see our logo it speaks to preparedness, mitigation, response, and recovery. It is also helpful in policy making related to disaster management. The Disaster Management Coordination Agency, DMCA, can be revolutionized through GIS, advanced wireless technologies, and web-based applications to enhance the coordination of response efforts and in planning for disaster risk reduction. And here we can see the planning phase, which is in line with disaster management planning. And in terms of DMCA, we are instrumental at both the data collection and the use of the data that's already collected. So the data is collected from various sources, from paper-based, videos, pictures. It's converted, stored on a computer or server. Data is analyzed, and the information is passed on to the prospective users, like myself. And you will notice that it starts and ends with the real world, because that's what we are dealing with. How do GIS databases help disaster managers? There are three areas which comes to mind. It helps in pre-disaster planning and preparedness, prediction and early warning, and in damage assessment and relief management. GIS combines layers of information on various themes to enable disaster managers to take the most appropriate decisions under any given circumstance. And you can see the instrument there is one that we use to collect the data using global positioning satellites. Uses of GIS in disaster management, and these are some of the areas. I wouldn't read them all. You could see them there. I mentioned damage assessments already, and the other related ones. By conducting comprehensive risk assessments using GIS-based mapping techniques and monitoring systems, DMCA can determine how susceptible the Silver Hills sinkhole is. And this information can be used to prioritize resources effectively and devise preemptive measures accordingly. And this is a local example for us. There is a sinkhole in the Silver Hills area that we manage from time to time, and it has grown over time. And if you can see the photo clearly, there was some fencing before, but it grew and consumed some of the fencing. So we know that there are hiking activities in the area, so we monitor it very closely. In the mitigation phase, GIS technology plays a pivotal role by providing essential tools for data collection, analysis, and visualization, which aids in risk assessment, identification of high-risk zone, vulnerability analysis, and developing robust disaster management plans. The utilization of these geospatial technologies enables persons like myself to predict potential hazards accurately and identify areas of maximum risk. And another local example, again, is the mapping of the western coastline, which was done by a PhD student from Montserrat, Ms. Siobhan Howe, and it identifies the areas vulnerable in the event that there's any tsunami impacts, which helps us to determine the escape routes and how high persons have to be to protect themselves in the event of a tsunami. In the response phase, GIS is useful in disaster and emergency response as it gives more accurate information to responders so that they have a clear sense of the current situation. This helps to provide a level of safety for responders and victims. And another local example is where we have bushfires from time to time, and unfortunately, we have people go missing as well. And you can see our drone on the right-hand side here. It's not a toy. It is a very, very, very useful instrument. It gives a real-time view of the terrain and the topography so that the fire department and ourselves can plan and prepare accordingly. In the response phase again, GIS technology's ability to gather real-time data during an event becomes invaluable in managing ongoing crises. It facilitates immediate response strategies by creating situation maps that identify affected areas quickly while estimating population density and locating evacuation routes efficiently. And another example we have again is the Belém Valley. We have lahars from time to time, which cuts off folks who find themselves on the southern side of the valley. And this happens every time there's heavy rain, and we have to treat and plan for it accordingly. In post-disaster assessment, which is part of the recovery phase, another crucial aspect is where GIS provides significant assistance through spatial analysis of the affected region post-event. It helps to evaluate the extent of the damage quantitatively and qualitatively. Another local example again is the Belém Valley. We know it floods, lahars occur, and we have a record of the damage and what is needed to restore the crossing when it happens. We have folks living on the southern side, as we all know, so we are very mindful of that and try to restore the crossing as soon as possible after lahar. Prior to GIS, when the concept of geographical information system did not exist, response decisions during and after impact emergencies and disasters were mostly taken on the basis of memory, of prior experiences, and intuition, guessing, rather than any live or documented information. But today, live data on many parameters such as topography, geographic features, terrain, population, infrastructure, and demographics can be crucial to disaster response and recovery activities. And the future of GIS in disaster management. Disaster managers could generate maps both at micro and macro levels, indicating vulnerability to different extents under different threat perceptions. Locations likely to remain unaffected or remain comparatively safe could be identified. Alternate routes to shelters and important locations in the event of disruption of normal surface communication could be worked out as well. And it also aids in the smooth rescue and evacuation operations that could be more properly planned. Rehabilitation and post-disaster reconstruction works could be properly organized, and locations suitable for construction of shelters, etc., can be identified more scientifically. Areas where no construction ought to take place or existing habitations requiring relocation, again, could be identified. And this is a practical example of GIS and geospatial data. This is a map of our hazard zones, and if let's say something were to occur, I could ask Mrs. Ryan how many people are living in Zone A, which I may need to evacuate. So that, in a sense, helps in that planning process where the information is located at one area and could be easily retrieved for decision making. And I would just like to give a practical example of one of our data collection instruments, which is our drone, in actual use. And this is why I say it's definitely not a toy. It's quite useful to us, and especially in monitoring the Delmaude Valley, as it's doing here now. This is, I think, this was the second day after a Laha event, where we are monitoring the water levels with a view, like I said again, to restore the crossing as soon as possible. So in conclusion, Geographical Information Systems, GIS, has emerged as an effective tool in management of disasters, since geospatial data and socio-economic information need to be merged for better decision-making and in handling a disaster, or to plan for tackling a disaster in a better way. GIS could be utilized by the different line departments and agencies who are stakeholders in the disaster management process again. And studies have helped in making it possible to forecast and simulate disaster occurrences concerning specific locations, helping in the initial stages of search and rescue operations. Techniques like satellite imagery and GIS help to identify disaster-prone areas, and it helps us, as a result, to zone them according to the risk magnitudes. These tools are useful in managing disasters, as they provide instant access to the critical information necessary in making disaster management decisions. Thank you. I've been asked to invite questions. Please be gentle. Mm.
How wide is it and how deep is it, and you guys use GIS technology to go inside of it?
Yes, I can't remember exactly how deep it is, but a small drone was flown down in it. It's pretty deep.
And at the bottom of it, is it like the ocean, or what's at the bottom?
I think it's water, from my recollection. I think it's the water actually eroding the soil, creating that sinkhole. It's pretty close to the coastline, right. So it's coming from underneath.
Last question. Approximately, can you give a time frame if the erosion will take over everything and break it off?
Well, I'm not able to give a time frame at the moment, but like I said, we have witnessed it growing, and it's pretty close to the coastline. So I guess in a matter of time, that'll be broken off. That sheer cliff will be broken off.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Lieutenant Ryan, thank you so much for that engaging discussion on disaster management, and I hope that we have gleaned some new knowledge. We'll now move on to our next speaker, who is Mr. Jose Marrero. He holds a PhD in geography from the La Laguna University in Spain. He has more than 18 years experience in risk and hazard assessments in volcanic active areas. He has had the opportunity to participate in several emergencies in Spain and Ecuador due to the eruptions and earthquakes. He now focuses his attention on finding solutions for problems that can arise between scientists, decision makers, and populations. In the recent past, Dr. Marrero has worked as a mayor's advisor of the Quito Metropolitan District in Ecuador. That's a city with a population of more than 3 million people. He developed two methodologies to understand the territory and the risk. Currently, Dr. Marrero is the Hazard and Risk Assessment Officer at the Montserrat Volcano Observatory, and he is responsible for the development of volcanic hazard maps of the Soufriere Hills volcano. Please help me welcome Mr. Jose Marrero.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk and explain very shortly what I do with the GIS, with the geographic data. I have to say that I prepared something which is a combination between my experience, my outside of Montserrat. I have been working in many places, and also some examples about what we are doing here, how we understand the geographic data, how we work with them, and things like that, okay? So, if you please. The first is just a preliminary ideas. It's a, this is a simple idea, but I think it's very important in the GIS. It's a, when you have a problem with your car and you go to a mechanic, you don't mind how well the mechanic manage the tools. What you want, it's the knowledge of that person to find the problem of your car and fix it at reasonable cost. Basically, this is what you want. In the GIS, it's something similar. It's more important, for me, it's more important the knowledge that someone have in the management of geographic data. This is more important that says that I manage one tool, one GIS, because it doesn't mean necessarily that knowing that tool, you know what to do. So this is the first idea. A part of that, sometimes people misunderstand the difference between geographic data and the tools that we use to manage them, okay? And here, the most important is the use, for me, is the use of standard formats. If we use standard formats, we can share with everybody whatever we do. It doesn't matter what kind of tool the people have, You can use whatever is more nice to you or whatever tool you know more. So this is it's also important, and it's important especially at local governments or collaboration between departments and things like that, okay? In order to avoid difficulties, just because you are using a proprietary format that it can only be managed with one specific software, making everything very complicated. So the other idea is the process automating. I always have problem with that word in English. Okay, so the question is that whatever we develop, it's important to have the capacity to update. Because the environment is changing. So if it took me, the first time, it took me, I don't know, 1 month working, in understanding something, find the best way, whatever, then it's important to have the capacity to replicate the same job, but really in a really short time. So at the same time we are developing something, we are also thinking how to make it automatic, okay? In order to get the update of all that information and keep it updated for everybody, okay? So this is the second idea. So what I do when I arrive at a place, it's try to understand. I work in risk and hazard. So for that, what I do is try to understand both the natural environment at one side and the built environment. It's just what the natural environment can do in terms of hazard, for example, and where is the people? Where are people located in that place? How is the infrastructure and everything? Because at the end of the day, you have to find some kind of connection between one and another if you want to work on risk, okay? So here is an example, for example, connected with the built environment, because the things I tried to get first, it's the location of the buildings and the road transportation. This is the first that I tried to get in order to understand the distribution of people in one space. So here, when I arrived, I tried to download the layer, the geographic layer, for example, that represent the road transportation. And after that, I see the data, I see if I can improve the data, how improve them, whatever, you know. So at the end, I can characterize all the transportation network. Here in the island, one of the nice things is that the island is small, so you can work very in detail, you know, in trying to understand all the island. In other places, there are so much information, it's so big, that it took a lot of time to understand everything, you know. So, well, here you can see the road transportation in the north, but also in the south, because we are working in the south around the volcano. I tried to understand how was the impact from the beginning of the eruption as a part of the hazard maps. I mean, I'm trying to understand both, what the volcano did and how that hazard affect, let's say, the side of the island, okay? So here is an example. When we have when we have the road transportation, then we can start working with that data to get something different. Let's say, make an analysis. So here, what I try to represent is, for example, the road transportation, it's represented as a lines initially, okay? But after that, I can transform the lines into points, separated at equal distance. So instead of a line representing one road, I have points. When I have points, I can make calculation in each one of them. In this case, the things I wanted to understand was the slope at each side of the road. Why? Because, for example, every time we have heavy rain, sometimes we have small landslides. So here the color, it's telling you in which areas, for example, in the light colors, the lower values, you can see roads that are like flat at both sides, okay? And when the color is more intense, what you see, it's, for example, that we have a road in this way, and then we have a steep slope in one side, in another side. So it's more complicated. It could be more complicated. So this is the first. It's like trying to get a model to see the road transportation, but with a different eyes, okay? And when we have that, the next step is just trying to verify if our model makes sense. And for that, we use the data presented before, where it's happening, the landslide or that kind of problem, to see if what we are getting from a global analysis makes sense with the reality, or not. So this is one way to verify what we do, okay? So this is from the point of view of the built environment. And now we go to the natural environment. In this case, what we try to represent here is the rock falls and possible small dome collapse that could happen actually without any eruptive activity, okay? So that's the idea. So we first define the lava dome, where is located the lava dome, which is the area of the lava dome. And then after that, we made some simulation. It's like a gravitational flow models in order to understand what could be the most common path followed by possible rockfalls and small lump collapse. So with that, we get different directions, okay? And at the end, we can represent the possible run-out distance of that kind of process in order to get a hazard map, okay? And then we can check if what we are doing makes sense or not. For example, this is an event that we have the opportunity to take the pictures and identify very well when what's happening and how it was. So this is the source area, and then is in the lower part, you can see the run-out distance, and in the map, you can see the green triangle, which is the source area, and the red triangle, just trying to represent the maximum distance followed by the rockfall. So this is one way, again, to compare one with another, okay? Here, just some recommendation. It's not based in what I see here. It's just, what I saw in many other places, okay? In my perspective, today, using the GIS capacity, understanding, and so on, it's very important to monitor the space, the global space in which we are living. So, for example, the MBO actually is monitoring the volcano, but we can also monitor the island in the follow. It's more or less what the previous the lieutenant, sorry, what he said before. It's, for example, where is happening the landslides, you know? If you have the coordinates, if you have a description of how was the event and things like that, okay? So this is the first. If you have all that information, you can understand what is going on in the island. And it's not just the volcano, it's other type of hazard. So because for planning in risk, you need a global vision. I mean, you cannot send people because something is happening here without taking into account other possible hazard that could also affect, because maybe you are putting into increasing the risk of that people if you don't take into account other aspects, okay? So that's it. What is the problem sometimes that I observe in other places, that when they take that information, sometimes they prioritize reporting. I mean, it's like writing what happened in a document, okay? This is what happened, so you have a document. The problem with the document, I mean, the good part is that you have a good description of the problem. But the bad of that is that sometimes accessing a report, it's more complicated, that if that data somehow, or the most important of that data, they are structured in a, let's say, Excel file, because I can manage more easy that information. So let's say that we need both the reporting approach to describe what happened, but also some kind of a structure that allow us to manage easily all the information in order to, well, understand what is going on in the island, basically, okay? And then the other question is the collaboration between the institution in general. One of the problems that I observed today is that we tend to work like in isolated places. I have my information, I have this, and this, at the end of the day, it's bad, in my opinion, because, for example, I can develop the hazard map, the volcanic hazard map, but at the same time, I need to understand what is going in the island. I need to understand if my information makes sense or not, together with other type of data, okay? So it's important to improve the collaboration between everybody involved, in this case, in geographic data, you know, in the management of geographic data. Put everything together, everybody has something to say. Everybody have relevant information. The question is that sometimes this information is not in the right format. So we have to work with it in order to make it more easy to use it. Okay? But still they have important information. So how to take it, incorporate that information in order to create a more powerful data set, that allow us to understand the island from different perspectives. And this is a process that, let's say, it's a bidirectional process. I give you my information, you give me mine, and I can learn more, and you can use also my information to learn by yourself and focus on your problem. So that is the idea. And this is everything. I think on time? Okay. Well, questions? Somebody have any question?
You mentioned use GIS technology to monitor rockfall. Can you give some detail on like the size of the rockfall and the intensity and the damage or anything on the rockfalls?
Okay, the question of the rockfall is that it's very difficult to monitor. I mean, we can detect the rockfall, but it's really difficult to know where, because sometimes the site of the event is so small, and it's very complicated to stay close to the dome collapse. Because in this case, it's focused in the dome, So it's very difficult to do that. It's because of that we include simulations. Okay, so let's say we don't have enough real data to mapping the affected area, because the difficulties to get that information. So what we do is, in this case, use simulations. And with that, we try to represent how could it be possible events, the impacted areas, but possible events. So this is what we do. So the map that I showed before, it's basically trying to represent different run-out distance. So because, for example, we have different monitoring areas around, so it's important for us to know which one of them is more exposed or less exposed, in this case, to this type of event. So the GIS, again, the GIS is the background, but for example, for this, I use a simulation out of the GIS. It's a software, an algorithm that you process, then you get geographic data, and then I use the GIS to represent them. But the process is out of the GIS as a tool. Okay? Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Marrero. What stood out most to me was the importance of not only having reports, word reports, but having that data in a usable format, and to also encourage collaboration. So thank you very much for that. Our next presenter is Ms. Siobhan Tuitt. She is our Chief Statistician at the Department of Statistics in the Ministry of Finance and Economic Management. She holds a bachelor's degree in Economics and Statistics from the University of the West Indies, Jamaica, and a master's degree in statistics as well from the University of Southampton. Passionate, and I can say this with no fear, passionate about leveraging official statistics for decision-making, she actively contributes to the national development through data production and dissemination. Ms. Tuitt recognizes the importance of GIS in statistical offices for informed policy formulation. Ms. Tuitt sees the potential in GIS platforms for career opportunities and as a valuable resource for Montserrat's growth. Please help me welcome Ms. Tuitt to the podium.
Thank you, Mrs. Ryan, and good morning, everybody. So my presentation this morning is really to talk about the integrated approach between GIS and statistics. And before I begin, what I want you to take away from today is simply that GIS makes our work that much easier. As statisticians, we have become dependent on Team GIS and the work that they do to ensure that we are more effective and more efficient in our delivery. All right? GIS, for you, the users, it presents that visual representation of the data. No longer can we give you data in tabular forms. No longer can we just give you data in a report. It's not happening. People are not reading them. But with things like GIS, we're able to show you, we're able to connect the where and what the data is saying. And we do this through the help of the geospatial data and the marvelous work that Mrs. Ryan and her team is doing. Let me say here that within our department, it's not just an end product, but it helps us throughout a lot of our processes and methodologies. All right, so today we're going to talk about the census, but that's not the only way that Team GIS helps us and helps me to sleep at nights. So true to our tagline, telling Montserrat's story through data, better lives. Again, there is so much power in seeing the data. The lieutenant mentioned vulnerability mapping. It's one thing for stats to say that in Salem or in Fritz we have how many houses that are vulnerable or whatever the case to disasters. But if we can show you, it has more impact. And that is what we want to do. Push the use of statistics, make it easier for persons to understand. And GIS, I'm telling you today, facilitates just that. It'll be remiss of me to not remind us about the importance of statistics, and I'm not going to belabor you with all of the fancy words there, but the reality is what we do is we collect, compile, disseminate data. And more importantly now, we're going beyond just disseminating. We're trying to push the use, because statistics is a public good. It's not for the government, it's for us. All right? So what it is that we are doing is firstly for us, for the household, for the population. How can you use the data to make better informed decisions? Yes, the government is already doing that. They have a whole policy unit of which, through the works of GIS and statistics, we share the findings and they make decisions for the government and people of Montserrat. But more importantly, you as students, how are you also using the data? All right? So at GIS, as the presenters before me would have alluded to, it is really a computer-based information system that enables us to capture, model, store, share, and more importantly, conduct analysis on geographically referenced data. And I just want to put that into perspective here. When we talk about spatial data, we're talking about data that is tied to a specific location. Let's get away from the fancy words. It is data that has location attached to it. And that in itself is valuable, rich. So the GIS connects our data and we give you in a map. We're talking about where are things happening? What are we seeing in St. John's? What are we seeing in Salem? How can we mitigate? How can we fix? So if we're talking about where and how we use it in our pre-stages because we're going to get into the maps. You see the maps around here. These maps were actually done by the GIS team, And without these maps, our enumerators would not have been able to conduct the enumeration exercise. A lot of times we take for granted that, okay, I'm from St. John, so I know the area. But by the time you start canvassing, you realize there's so many more buildings, which therefore means it will slow you down. But if we provide these maps before you, you can canvass and know your area, and therefore you are more efficient. So when we tell you we want you out of the field in 4 weeks, you're out of the field in 4 weeks. Again, GIS making our lives easier. GIS and the National Statistical Offices. So it enhances our ability to record geographic data points with increased accuracy, right? It also helps us to better analyze complex data sets and present our census and survey data with advanced visualization. I mentioned this before, the power to see what is being spoken about is powerful. GIS and statistics together, we touch lives. We make lives better. That's what we do, all right? In insightful and impactful ways. Without us, there's no way that the policies will be as impactful as they need to be. Lieutenant Colonel again mentioned vulnerability mapping. In Montserrat, we are vulnerable to a lot of things. And I'm almost certain, much like me, he sleeps better knowing that he has access to Team GIS. And he has said, indeed. These things help us to be able to act quickly, to be informed. All right? So in terms of GIS and not just stats, we're going now to national development. All right? So GIS is widely used by us, yes, and we are the bedrock or the cornerstone to a lot of other ministries, departments, and agencies. And again, let's always rein it back to what is it that we're trying to do. We're trying to make a better place. We're trying to improve lives. That is why we're collecting the data. All right? We're trying to make something better. And when we do so, we're hoping to, what? Enable efficient use of resources, enhance data analysis and reporting, and advice on policy and planning decision. The capabilities of GIS are transformative for the decision-making processes in fields such as physical planning, for residential and commercial development, public safety and disaster management that we heard about just now, environmental conservation, and climate change resilience. So now we'll get into how we are currently using GIS within the statistical department with the 2023 population and housing census. Updating the geographical maps. You would see here our maps as at 2010 and the maps that were done in 2022, right? Yes. So these are the maps that were done in the 2011 population housing census and the maps that were used for the 2023 population housing census. Again, these maps helped us to be able to find homes. We like to pride ourselves and say, Montserrat is very small and we know everybody. We do not. It is difficult out there canvassing. It is very difficult. All right? So, again, Team GIS, and let me commend them. The procurement of the drone, which is behind us here, Tobias, this is what we use to procure the images to create those maps. And they did this training virtually. During COVID. It was challenging, and they did it, a very small team of them, and they have been able to successfully produce the maps that enabled us to get out into the field. And again, let me say publicly, thank you to the team for their very hard work. It was difficult. I sat in on a few of the sessions, and I believe I got headaches. But we're thankful for the work. In terms of assessment of areas to be covered before and during field enumeration activities for surveys and censuses. So these, as I said, were done, the maps were done in 2021, which then fueled a lot of conversation between GIS and the stats department. Do we need to split some of the enumeration areas? A lot of things would have changed between 2010 and 2021. And so with these images, it started a lot of additional conversations that we needed to do before we get into the field. All right? Now, in terms of the back end, the analysis of the census and survey data collected, in the 2011 round, we did produce a few maps where we showed what the demographics were like after the completion of the population housing census. And again, we're going to be doing this with the results from this current census. Again, getting away from that tabular formation, but letting you see what the data looks like. Right. So the issue of geocoding, when our enumerators get to you, we have what is considered the GPS coordinates for the homes and or businesses, and this really helps our census enumerators to get to the home. So there's no mistake. You know where it is that you're supposed to be going. All right? The enumeration in terms of clearly demarking the areas that we are canvassing is absolutely important. A lot of times, what is known to be St. John's is not traditionally St. John's to us here in St. John's, to us in the stats department, sorry. And we need to make sure that, again, our field staff, they're absolutely clear about what it is that they're doing. If they're not, then the process will take that much longer. And the census in itself is already a very costly exercise, all right? We need to make sure that the enumeration areas are always well-defined and manageable in terms of the workload. So where we need to split, where we need to do different things, we can do them. Next. So this is what the habitable map of Montserrat looks like, the 1/3. And here we see each of the enumeration areas, these little pockets, well delineated. We were only able to do that through the work of the GIS team. Next. Okay, and just to show you, so this, the green area represents one enumeration area. This is Little Bay, and the code that goes with it. Again, GIS helps us to ensure that the area to be surveyed is well defined, well managed, well manageable. Okay, so over here we have the map. And now, so here we're looking at Braids Shinlands. This is what our enumerators will see on their tablet when they go into the field, all right? Identifying buildings, right. So each building is clearly numbered. Continue. So when we produce your maps are well labeled, and we give you the canvassing instructions. We tell you how to walk the area. We tell you how to collect the data. All right? Without this, it will be a headache just literally walking, trying to collect the data. So this is what some of the maps look like. Might be a bit difficult to see, but the yellow area that represents the boundary area that you're working within, and each enumerator is responsible for one enumeration area, all right? Play. So here, something is missing, you're not actually seeing. So what we actually have here is a video of, right, the drone in operation. So as the drone is being operated by Mrs. Ryan, we see the multiple images that are being collected. It's a lot of images to stitch together to produce these maps. It is not easy work. Millions of pictures are being captured, and if you look at it over here, literally to do one enumeration area. It is a heavy exercise, and it's something that we should not take for granted. All right, next. All right, so here we are with Tobias. This was in the training exercise. Our enumerators, when they get to you, like I said, they have their tablets with the maps already loaded onto them. So the canvassing route is very clear for them to follow. Play. More of teamwork. Here we have a staff from DMCA who was trained in the operation of our drone, assisting us with a flight plan. And on the other side, we have a member of the RMPS assisting us again with our operations. And we say thank you to all the other departments who would have assisted us in the works that we have carried out. Our drone is slightly different to the one that the Lieutenant Colonel would have mentioned, simply because ours is specific for mapping purposes. All right, so the Galloway UX11 that is behind us, it's really good with imagery. It's precise and it's good. It's very easy for mapping. And if you do a quick analysis between the 2010 and 2021 images, you will see that the quality is far better according to the expert. Right. But yeah. So again, just to show you what GIS helps us to do in terms of our preparedness before we get into the field. This is what a map, a part of a map would look like on each of the buildings well identified for our enumerators. Very quickly, general benefits and advantages of geospatial information systems. And when we talk about data analytics, I guess the new world that we live in, it's absolutely important that analysis of our socioeconomic indicators are geo-referenced. There is merit in being able to say, in St. John's North, there's a prevalence of type 2 diabetes at the general level, at the high level. Okay, and Fritz, we know that we're prone to flooding. How can we mitigate? How can we do something about it? Can something be done about it? Policy and planning, decision making. The integration of spatial data with statistical information promotes or should promote evidence-based policy and planning that targets our specific needs. So we come to your household and we ask you these 1,000,001 questions because we are trying to understand what did Montserrat look like as at September 12th? What were the challenges? What were the issues? After that, then we present to say this is what Montserrat was, or these are the situations that presented itself as at September 12th, and hopefully it feeds into the policy and planning. Public engagement. GIS helps in terms of that visual ease on the eyes and sometimes understanding. A lot of times when you're trying to analyze data in a tabular form, it's just very difficult. But you might quicker understand when you see it visually. And GIS helps us just to do that, all right? We have come to a time where access to funding and or resources a lot of times is data dependent. There's no getting without providing data these days. And geospatial or GIS techniques helps us to ensure that we have some of these data available and in easier formats to comprehend. So GIS technology holds immense potential for Montserrat and by extension the region, and it has the ability to significantly improve our livelihoods. And that's very, very important. Every data point we gather from migration patterns of our citizens or our businesses, you know, they operate within a specific context. In our increasingly globalized world, and more importantly for small island developing states, our environments, our economies, and societies are very spatial and interconnected. So we can map it, we can show it, provided we have the data. So once you provide the data, we're able to show you and help you to understand what's happening. We boast of things like natural resources, or beautiful beaches, and everything else that the Caribbean boasts of. But oftentimes, we need to ensure that the requisite data and analysis is being done accordingly to manage, protect, and mitigate our resources. So GIS, with our rich data, helps us to perform spatial analyses that reveal patterns in our population and in the various other things that we choose to monitor. All right? Next. In terms of the potential for advanced GIS technologies for sustainable development, we can benefit from advanced GIS technologies, including remote sensing, which I heard the Lieutenant Colonel speaking to, so I will not get into that. Real-time data collection, which involves immediate acquisition and processing of data, allowing for instantaneous analysis and decision-making. Not quite there yet, but it's something that we need to work towards. The use of artificial intelligence in terms of our algorithms and other such things to help us to analyze and interpret data. These technologies can contribute to more informed decision-making and improving our resource management and effective responses to dynamic and complex challenges across each of our fields. Ladies and gentlemen, students, thank you for your time. Any questions? Sure.
You mentioned how much of an improvement GIS has done for statistics. The question I want to ask is, the census project in 2011, was it, or 2010? How much or what level did it cut the time to complete or to work on the census project?
Okay. So in 2010, what we did was a flyover. So Laverne and some experts, they went into a plane and they flew over and they took images. You can imagine that there was cloud cover, there was many other things that affected the quality of the images that we got. All right? Now, obviously, something like that, you have this project only for a number of days, and then the plane and the persons are no longer here. So the quality of the maps were affected. That's one. Cost. A flyover was that much more expensive, so we have been able to save through the use of the drone significantly. All right? Now, in terms of timing, the mapping in itself, it took a very long time, but we need to put things into perspective. The team was trained virtually. We sent back Tobias to the manufacturers twice for repairs, amongst other things. And what else do I want to say in terms of your question? So in terms of the GIS and the maps, I think I've answered you, but I do believe what you want to ask me is in terms of the new methodology that we're now using. So we have gone away from PAPI, which is paper-based, to now CAPI, where we're using tablets. So essentially what's happening here, we have gotten rid of the whole data entry aspect. So we no longer have to hire persons to enter the data. When we come to your homes, we collect the data, it goes automatically into our database. So yes, we have projected a much reduced timeline for reporting the results. I think that is the question you wanted me to answer. Okay.
Working. Or can I use the number that is generated for the houses to add to my address?
No, that is not what those numbers for. I'm so sorry. We do not have that type of mailing system, so to speak. I'm sorry. So this is solely for identification of the buildings for statistical purposes. Very sorry.
Now, just to put things in perspective, when we did that flyover in 2010, in terms of cost, it was $1 million to do the flyover.
Thank you for the statistics. So I will repeat. So there we have it. The flyover alone costed $1 million, in the words of those who were there at the time. And it is so because we have done the comparison. And one of the things that we would have presented when we were trying to acquire the drone was to show the cost reduction to the government and people of Montserrat. Mr. Ryan?
Yes, my question is related to the numbering of the houses and the buildings. How do they in fact tie back to the physical planning process or lands and survey?
So it is actually done jointly together. So once we have collected our information, then the information should feed back seamlessly into the GIS.
So everybody's on one page?
We are on one page. So we've been talking about this for a very long time, and we're trying to make sure that we are in sync at all times.
So technically, they can maybe be used in time for addresses.
Thank you for that. I have a question from the minister. Should I be afraid? Whoa.
No need to be afraid. Thank you very much for that presentation, very clearly and very well laid out, if I may say so. The question I have, given maybe it's not for you, but for the GIS technicians maybe, about the suitability of that drone that we have in terms of age, technological advances in terms of better drones and that sort of thing. How happy we are with this one, and then two, maybe for yourself, Siobhan, in terms of data privacy, hacking, that sort of thing, with all that information that you're collecting in your surveys and your census and all of that. How comfortable are we with that sort of information being properly stored, properly protected, so persons can feel that much safer with giving you that information?
Sure. Thank you for that question, Minister. Both very timely. So the drone before us here is still considered one of the best for the intended purposes, which is to collect images for mapping purposes. As with the changes are happening, things are happening, we foresee that we will need to upgrade her in some short order. Much like our tablets, we would have purchased tablets for the labor force census in 2018, and we had to replace tablets in 2023. These things happen. So I cannot definitively tell you what timeline we have with this particular drone, but censuses at present are every 10 years. So on to your second question with regards to data privacy and the new methodology in terms of CAPI. What I wish to remind is that the operations of the statistics department are completely in line with the protocols established by the department with responsibility for our information technology, and e-commerce. All right? So our online servers, any of our data that is stored is well protected and in line with the procedures and right, that is approved by DITES. Do I have any more questions? Students? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Stewart. That was indeed quite engaging and interactive. I can add to the response to the minister in terms of the capabilities of the drone. And for future, there are things that we can do on island to make it last even longer. For example, our geodetic network needs to be upgraded so that we won't have to be putting down individual control points. We have something that's automated online, and we can continue to collect data seamlessly. So we can reduce the effort and get good data still. Yes? I have put up this image on the screen. I hope you've looked at it for a while we were talking. If anybody can identify the area and tell me two differences, not Siobhan, tell me two differences that you can see in the images. So we have one from 2010, which is a satellite-based image, and the other from our drone data, which is 2022. I see, not the teacher, no? I need a student, please. If you can use the mic and just identify the area that you see. There's the mic.
So the area that I am seeing here right now is Blake's football field.
Correct.
And I could see the difference in 2022 as there's a bit of construction happening in the right-hand corner.
Can you name the building that you see being constructed? Actually, it's completed. Can you name the building?
No.
Anybody can name the building? What's the name? I'm not getting you. Use the mic. Yes. That's the Montserrat Football Association dormitory building. Right? So you can clearly see the update in the imagery. Right? I have other examples, but we'll get to those. For now, we'll go to our next presenter. One second. Okay. Okay, so our next presenter is Mr. Rolando Khassie. He has more than 25 years' experience working in the built environment, operating in various capacities. He is a graduate of the University of Technology and also has a master's in project management and infrastructure development from the University of Liverpool. Several major infrastructure developments and construction projects across the Caribbean has witnessed his technical input firsthand. So please help me to welcome Mr. Rolando Khassie to the podium.
Good day, everyone. Okay, I like what was coined for the session. It's called a lightning talk. So I'm going to lightning through. So I have a presentation here. I'm going to try to give some description to some of the images for those who are just listening. So as you go ahead. So we're going to go through data management and infrastructure projects, assessment reports, and Montserrat future as it relates to GIS. So let's start with data management. Now, in regards to data management, for us, from the infrastructure standpoint, we have infrastructure assets. Now, everyone has their home, their car, and they recognize that it has value. But for us, we recognize that the culverts, the sidewalks, the streets, they have value. And we need to keep abreast of our infrastructure assets. So in terms of data management, we have infrastructure assets, building assets, subsurface modeling. Now, subsurface modeling, we have a lot of ductings in Montserrat that carry our internet, water, energy in the future. And we need to be aware of where they're located for even future development. Engineering data, we have a survey department, both at the planning section and in public works. Our surveyor, Courtney Peters. Whenever we do surveys, we can tag this into GIS. And over time, we'll have an overall picture of Montserrat topography in detail. Yeah? And we use these information for designing and modeling for future development. Now, GIS is something that everybody is aware of, and they may not recognize it, but it comes down to your phone, right? So you have Android and you have iOS. So sorry for the Android people, I am an iOS man. And for the iOS, let's not start the war. For the iOS, there are times it will pop up and say, 2018, here are some images. You go to a location and it reminds you of events that occurred. So the brain, we collect a lot more data now today, as everybody here is aware, and the brain cannot hold all that data. The GIS helps us by creating layers and layers and layers. So every event that occurred, every road that we paved, when did we pave it, every repair that was done to a particular building, over time those layers add up. And we can go back to the iPhone and ask it what transpired, right? So that's just to give you on-the-ground perspective of what GIS does. So as I said before, it is spatial data. Now what we have here is a map. Now this map, I tried to describe it, it has several color lines. These lines represent our road network. Now on Montserrat, we classify our roads as A roads, B roads, and C roads, where primarily the A roads is consisting of asphalt concrete. Our B and C may have concrete, what we call Portland cement concrete. So just for classification, the black one is the asphalt. The white one is the concrete, or the gray one, okay? And then we use, okay, go ahead. So we're into infrastructure. We're looking at AO1 road project, which was done in 2008 to 2010. It came at a funding cost of about 14 million. We completed about 8 kilometers of paved road. We did a lot of subsurface ducting. Now, the reason why we did subsurface ducting is for resilience and climate change. In the future, when we put all our utilities underground, we won't be concerned about hurricanes disrupting, and you won't lose Wi-Fi during hurricane. It can still be on social media for all you people from the colleges, okay? So you won't lose touch with your friends. And we also were able to track our culverts, drains, and sidewalks. Now, at the bottom left here, you can see we have data collection. In the duration of an infrastructure project, it will take about 20% of the time collecting data, surveys, where land parcels are located, where services are located. We need all that information before we commence design. We do a preliminary design, we go to our funding partners, and then we go to a more detailed design. That funding can take 40% of the time. Depends on how friendly our partners are with us. It can take longer. Procurement is about 10% of the time. And then implementation, which is a construction, can be 30%. Now you can see, if we can have GIS holding all that data, we can reduce the development of projects, the time required to develop projects, because the data will be at our fingertips in different layers, okay? And this is why I'm here. because Laverne coaxed me to come, because she constantly helped me. So there's a line drawing here on this picture. It's in yellow and red. That's an actual survey that was done by the Survey Department, Public Works, Mr. Courtney Peters, and the engineers, Ralston Patterson and Felix Prasad, and Mr. Foster as well. And we came up with a line drawing. Now, I went to Laverne and asked her, could you superimpose this and give it some spatial recognition in terms of the Montserrat landscape? And this is what we produced. We were able to produce a superimposed image showing where the road change alignment will impact parcels of land. It also gives us an idea of services in the area. And we can now say, okay, we can widen the road a bit more because it won't affect anybody's land. Or if we need to widen it more, we need to speak to this landowner because we're going to need to take some land. Oh, let me not say take. We're going to ask them for some land. Yes? So the survey data and the alignment designs and the land parcels, they all help for us to create a project. Now we're continuing pushing for the AO1 road project, phase 2, and it's going to come from Palm Loop to Hilltop, and this is the consideration that we're doing for the future. So let's look at assessment reports. Now, storm assessments. Whenever there's a storm, hurricane, rain, the guys at the Public Works Department tend to be out there, and we work with the DMCA. They're at the head, and they coordinate with our director. We're out there in the nights, we're in the day, we're the first ones out, right? And we start, we're strategically located. Persons are from CLM working their way back, persons from the north working forward, and so forth and so forth. And we take pictures and we analyze and we know where are the critical locations for us to send equipment or cleanup crews. So we assess residential properties to see the damages. We don't ascertain the costs. We look at the infrastructure and we assess GOM's buildings, the roads. We also look at MUL's infrastructure, the light posts, the waterways, those kind of things. On the infrastructure side, we do provide the costing. And then we create a report. It's what we call a rapid assessment report. And that report goes to the heads. Now, on your far right is a cover of a report that was produced and submitted. These would typically go to the ministers, the DMC head, the governor, premier. Now, on November 9, 2020, it wasn't a hurricane. It wasn't any considerable weather system. It just occurred. We had a considerable amount of rain in 24 hours. It was about 144 millimeters of rain. It was all outlined in the report. And based on the assessment that was done, we recognized that the damage was about $3.4 million. Now, from this report, we were able to get some funding to do some resilient work on some of the crossings. So you can see some work going on in Emma's Gut and some other crossings where we have changed the culverts and made them more resilient to aid with rockfall and landslides so that those areas will not be cut off again. Now, the picture that you're seeing here, and I'll try to describe it, it's several boulders in a road. And this is a one-way street on St. Peter's, and you can see a motor vehicle that's there. That vehicle was washed down from the gut, placed in the middle of the road, and is surrounded by rocks. We had to use heavy equipment to clear those rocks and provide access to the motoring public. Yes? Now, what we have now is another set that we use. And I don't know if it's clear to you, but you can see on the bottom right of that image, disaster risk. We got that from the physical development plan. So every area in Montserrat has a disaster risk, and it tells you, volcano, if it's low, if it's high, if it's medium. seismic, hurricane, high wind, flooding, storm surge. So in the St. John's area that we have, for example, it is saying that flooding is low. If you were to look at the physical development plan and look at an area such as Carsby, you will see flooding high risk. So everyone is aware of the risks that are associated as a result of the GIS image that we have. Now, we couple that with the disaster pictures that we took while we're out there in the field, so that persons can have a better understanding of what's happening. So for persons on the radio, we have images of landslides, we have areas where roads have been flooded, where debris has taken over the road. And on the same picture on the left here, you can see small blue dots. Those blue dots indicate areas that have been affected by that storm, right? So with GIS, which Alvin hasn't gotten these pictures as yet, but in time, GIS, over time, every disaster that we have, we can tag it, we can put a layer, we can see what happened over time, and we can see if any mitigation that we have put in place in terms of infrastructure has stopped that risk or lowered that risk. Yes? All right. This document, as you can see, that's 2443, so it was a 50-page document. I show you how much work we do. Montserrat future. Now, on the left here, we have a picture of a well-known Montserrat icon, Mr. Peter. You know, he's a hard-working man and does the country great justice. Now, mass transportation. Mass transportation is needed in this country in a good format. Reason being, approximately 40% of our fuel is consumed through transportation, which in private vehicles or the public vehicle. Now, Montserrat stands, and the statistician is here, don't crucify me, at a population of 4,500. And we currently have 3,800 registered vehicles. Now, we hope, based on the Sustainable Development Plan, to move to a population of 10,000 or 15,000. If we continue with the same trajectory, we will have too many cars and few roads, and then we become a congested environment, and the paradise that we love will change. So mass transportation is needed in a better format, right? And we also need to look at the private sector when considering the mass transportation. And we will use the opportunity to also modernize Montserrat streets. So this is our future. And I hope everybody looking up, especially the guys from the MCC, because you guys have to take it forward. Hopefully it's in the near future, not too far. So we need improved GIS technology. We also need improved technology. We are already getting there because we have fiber optic. I think Lonnie from ICT will say that we have about 90 to 95% coverage on the island for fiber optic in homes. That's good for most countries across the region. Yeah? And now we need to unlock the energy prospects. We have the geothermal, and with geothermal we can have lower operating costs for energy, right? And then we can improve processes. So, on your far right, there's a nice red bus. That bus is fully electric. They're already existing in Barbados and in Bahamas. We too can have them in Montserrat. Now with an electric bus, and if it's powered by geothermal, you pay $5 now. I don't know, you might pay less. Or you could get more rides for your $5 because the owners would not have to be concerned about the rising cost of fuel. Now we plan to couple those electric buses with nice bus stations. Now on the top left corner, There's a nice white building. It has a big digital screen that will have billboards for signage. So you'll see Digicel running around, Flow. These are not plugs. I just call in well-known brands on Island. MS Osborne. They can pay me after. And we have solar panels so that persons waiting on buses can sit, charge their phones, speak to someone. You can be updated of events that are coming around, right? You can reach out to persons, other businesses that will be advertising in this bus stop. And you have a nice seating comfort with nice chairs and flowers as well. And these are concepts that are being worked on by the architectural section in the Public Works Department. So contrary to popular belief that we wait, we don't wait, we are proactive. We are looking to push forward Montserrat future in a positive and modern light. And you might say to me, well, this will never happen. This is well into the future. This is a Jetsons requirement. But again, on the far right, you can see several motor vehicles. Those are hybrid and electric vehicles. They're already here. Persons are already using them, and they're growing almost, I won't say every month, but on a regular basis. The Energy Department, headed by Marissa Allen and her team, they approve electric vehicles and hybrids coming into the country. So the thought of an electric car is not far-fetched. Now you might ask, how does all of this tie into GIS? And we will get there. So we need improved GIS systems. We need to obtain geothermal power, a stage 1. So let's hope that we get it by 2024, we start it. And then 2026, we can do some road improvements where we start to put in these bus stops that you see. We start getting electric vehicle networks up and running. We start to acquire the electric buses for the private sector. And then we move into developing apps and engage in the private sector, and then we sensitize the general public on the use of these things. And then we can reach that goal. Very simple. Now, what will transpire is that we will have an app. So you will have an app on your phone, and this app, powered by GIS, will allow you to see where buses are, when they will arrive, and you can better plan your day and transportation. And you won't necessarily have to drive your vehicle. You can sit at home, and you can say, oh, Peter coming in 5 minutes, and I run up the road, and I grab a bus. And because it's much cheaper, I can ride it all day and then get back home. And your car sits at home and you save more money. So you have more money to travel, more money to party, and more money to give back to God. Don't forget that. So the bigger picture, no, you got to find. Energy, I think from the CPI index, energy accounts for about 33% of the weighted basket. So if we can reduce our energy consumption in terms of whether fuel, overall energy, it means that you have a better prospects in terms of cost of living. Now, when you look on the bus stops that we have, they give you, a better standard of living. You feel like you're in a more developed world, but this is the developed world in the Caribbean sense. We don't necessarily need those skyscrapers and stuff like that. We need it in the Montserrat context. So you have more disposable income, better standard of living, and a better way of life. And we're protecting the environment and the earth that we live on. So that's it. I want to point out that because we have so many young people here, you should look at GIS as a profession. We see everyone looking to be lawyers and doctors, but there are also other professions that are well needed. I remember when I came here and we started the program, the GIS program, it was Iftikhar that was here. and Laverne came and she took it to another level. And we're going to need somebody else to carry it to another level going forward. And that is why I'm standing here now, because we want to create a collaborative effort, but we need more persons to be there to work with Laverne to put that information together. And we are hoping to develop a project to try and see if we can get approximately another $1 million, Minister, towards GIS, because we need that information readily at hand so we can reduce the time in developing projects so that Montserrat can advance even faster. We can be a smart and well-utilized country based on information powered by GIS. And that is my presentation. So we'll open the floor to questions. Okay, so there's no questions. Thank you very much.
Okay, you spoke about the roads, improving the roads, but currently where we stand now, if there's an emergency in Ranwegot, we cannot get out of Salem. The other day there was an excavator that spilled over on Fogarty, and we couldn't get home for about 2-3 hours. So I'm wondering if you're taking into consideration making another road from St. Peter's to Cudgerhead and from Salem to Woodlands, so that we could.
So the gentleman here spoke about risk, and you have to look on risk and what is required and the resources that are available. We do recognize that we're limited in terms of the road network. Now, there's another road network that we are working on, which is the Bases Road. So we realized that certain equipment couldn't get around through Bases, and if there was a cutoff on our Carsby or anywhere else, we'd be cut off from the north. So we have already started to make an effort to improve Bases by making it wider, and we will continue on that. And it's the same thing around the Shinlands, and we're doing that because it's much more cost-effective and easier. So we tackle those first, because if you look at Fogarty, I think if we do something there, we'll end up on Discovery as modern marvels, you know, because we're going to drop a bridge across that or something like that for additional roads. You could go to Shinland? Okay, okay. So those are under consideration. We realize that we need redundancy in terms of the road network. I see the minister as well pushing for the Drummond's Road for us to come through Drummond's from Lookout. So we're looking at the ones, the quick wins that we can do with the resources that we do have.
Oh, I'm sorry, right. I have a question as it relates to Mr. Baker, as it relates to Fogarty. How about connecting from the gas station through Jones Hill and having a bridge from Jones Hill over to Shinlands?
Yeah,
is that a consideration?
As I said, there are many parts that you can take, but we look on it because we have our resources. Our team is already concentrating on things that are high priority. But when we get to that, then we look at it because we still have the Bellum crossing to look at. We have other, and Drummond's has been pushed by the minister, so we have to concentrate on that. Anything else? No.
Road as you mentioned, Bases Road as a sub road for risk. However, there was a risk on the Bases Road where a piece of a retaining wall basically failed, and I'm not sure if it collapsed, but it was definitely broken. How do you plan to manage more better risk management of possible failures as the reason for that failure was excess water, should I say? You can correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, so we had an issue in Vazis because of the recent storm. It didn't fall down. We did prudent action and just did preventative risk, took it down, but it's one small piece of a much larger wall. And the engineers are looking at it and they will correct it. But if you look at most of the returning structures that we've developed, they have gone through a lot of events, including storms, seismics, and they still stand. So we're very confident in what we put down. Yeah.
Okay, one of the road sections of the road which is of concern is that piece of road from Little Bay through to Davy Hill, which needs to be paved. In the event of a tsunami, coming out down at the entrance which presently exists is definitely not going to be possible. There is a road going up to Davy Hill, but it is not very user-friendly.
Right.
So is that a priority area for your department?
Again, welcome to GIS Day. And, but
just
yeah,
asking.
No, it's fine. It's fine. I'm just joking with you. If you look at Little Bay, you see there are several tsunami signs erected, and they tell you where the location. There's a safe point in Little Bay without actually leaving Little Bay. That road cutting from Davy Hill was cut as a result of us recognizing the need for another exit. But we made it just a dirt road for now, but yes, it's on the books for improvement. We will never cut a road and just leave it there.
Happy to hear that.
Yeah.
And while we're talking about roads, is there a consideration for, this is probably not your department, for solar lighting along the new roadways?
Yeah.
Because when there is a problem with the electricity and there's a blackout, the island is really blacked out.
Well,
and we know that with development comes increase in crime. We're not calling it. But if we have solar lighting, I think individuals will be more comfortable.
Right. I'm going to say something about lighting quickly. Yeah, so there are certain sections in Montserrat that we say, okay, let's not light it. Montserrat is not a crime-ridden society. We don't light it because it helps better with the stars. Persons can attest to that. If you go out stargazing in certain areas, it's beautiful here because we don't have that excessive amount of light. Now, in terms of the solar lights, if we have geothermal, we don't need solar per se, because geothermal will be a more constant form of energy, and it will be a lower cost. You can, you can operate your AC all day and feel comforted. And on that note, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Khassie. We have learned quite a bit, and I do love your prospects for the future, and we do look forward to that collaboration where GIS can indeed help us to advance our future aspirations. So I am aware of the time, young ones, and with that in mind, we're going to pass some refreshments to you, and we'll continue our discussion as we have our next presenter coming up, Mr. Adrian Galloway. He describes that as a child, he developed a deep love for construction while accompanying his father to construction sites. Today, with over 30 years in the industry, he has had the privilege of transforming vacant lands and buildings into homes and essential facilities. As a fellow of the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors, RICS, and holding a master's degree in civil engineering, his passion for his work remains strong. Currently, he serves as a director and project coordinator for the Galloway Group Incorporated. He oversees a wide range of projects from planning to completion. Please help me welcome Mr. Adrian Galloway.
Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for having me here today. It's a pleasure to be here. You could advance it. It's a pleasure to be here to give you some insights into the work I do and to share how GIS technology has actually helped me in performing my works. Ladies and gentlemen, the history of GIS is quite a glorious one, and it traces its genesis to a Canadian geographer who had started to integrate geography with cartography and computer sciences. This geographer was Dr. Roger Tomlinson, who was a pioneer in this science, and he revolutionized the way we actually look at GIS systems and GIS technology and integrated it into land use. Today I'm going to be lightning quick, and I'm just going to basically give you some real-life scenarios as to how we use GIS technology in my work. I'm going to talk about how GIS technology has helped me to improve my decision-making with regards to how I do my work in the construction industry. And I'm going to give you a quick synopsis of how I think the future of GIS technology is going to help us here in Montserrat with our sustainable development. And then I'll open up the floor for some questions and answers. I would like to start by sharing how I actually started out and started to use GIS technology. Way back when I was a wide-eyed undergraduate student, I was given an internship with an environmental agency in Florida called the St. John's River Water Management District. And this was an agency in Florida which was responsible for monitoring and controlling the waters, the natural resources, and various other components within Florida. My mentor and boss at the time, Dr. Andrew Howland, introduced me to GIS technology and all the facilities of it. And a good thing about it, he was a very good storyteller, and he was able to tell me a lot of stuff about GIS systems. Also, during the 1960s and 70s, during the Cold War, there was a race for these superpowers to develop surveillance systems, and these powers reached celestial heights by launching all kinds of satellites into the orbit to monitor to take spatial pictures and spatial images. And this culminated on July 20th, 1969, when Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin, walked on the moon. A story that my former boss had actually told me about this event was when they actually were training for their mission. It led them to some training sites in the western coast of America, which was Nevada, which was home to a lot of Indian tribes. And while they were training, one day they came across this Native American elderly man. And the native man asked him, "What are you doing in this area? What are you doing?" And they responded that they are part of this lunar mission who's going to be exploring the moon, and eventually they'll be doing some research on the moon. But this Native American man all of a sudden grew silent. But when he responded, he said, "I need you to do me a favor." And they asked him what was his favor. And he says, "My tribe believes that there are Holy Spirits living on the moon, and I need you to take a message from my tribe to these people." And they said, "Yes, we'll take the message." And he uttered something in his tribal language. And he got the astronauts to repeat it, and repeat it until they were able to memorize what he was saying. So by the time he was finished with this, they asked him what it meant. And he told them, "No, this is a special message between my tribe and the Holy Spirits of the moon. I cannot disclose that to you." So when the astronauts went back to the base, they finally searched and searched until they were able to track down somebody who was familiar with the tribal language and asked the person to translate what this Native American man had actually told them. And when they repeated what they had so carefully memorized, this young man started to laugh uproariously. But when he managed to calm down, and they asked him, what does it mean? And he told them, this sentence that you have so carefully memorized means don't believe a word that these people are telling you. They have come to steal your land, so do not tell them a thing. So just as these astronauts encountered this curious lunar twist, we in engineering and construction are now encountering a new phase by which it has surprised industry specialists as to how we're going to be incorporating this new technology into our work. And many of our industry specialists and many people in construction are realizing that the GIS technology has helped them to improve aspects such as site selection, aspects such as data planning, aspects such as, just planning the overall layout of their construction projects. So, and just as the mighty arrow has advised us, we'll be able to use GIS to hold on to our property and relate to our children. Just the sensible use of GIS technology. In my work, GIS technology has really helped us out a lot. In fact, one of the major uses that I use GIS technology for is laying out of sites. The technology has enabled me to be able to actually look at the terrain, look at the topography of the building, get geographical information of sites, and it has enabled us to be able to position sites better on buildings because you can see in advance what the topography or the terrain, the natural terrain of the building is. And you're able to incorporate a structure seamlessly on a particular site. Also, in my work as a valuation professional, GIS technology has also helped me greatly in order to assess the value of a property over time in relation to its location, because you now have spatial data where you can actually assess the value of a property, and you can know what is the effect of that value on the location of a property to resources, whether it be water features, whether it be a road network, whether it be other commercial aspects. So the GIS technology has improved and helped us to be able to assess property values from that perspective. Also, GIS technology has also helped in our decision making in terms of how we go about making decisions within our business. How we go about choosing sites, how we go about identifying the best opportunities, how we go about advising our clients as to how to build their buildings. The GIS technology enables us to assess that information and incorporate that design in our designs and our planning. Also, the future, I'm actually trying to speed this up as fast as possible because I realize that time is not on our side. GIS in the future, I predict that the GIS technology could be used to really improve and promote sustainable development within our island. Just by using, getting proper spatial information, satellite images, just location for surveying, that would help us to develop more sustainable practices within our construction industry, and also use this information to create buildings and projects that are in harmony with the environment and in harmony with the requirements of the users, with the general users. And as I close, I would like to say that, I really appreciate the work that the GIS department is doing for us as construction professionals. And I don't want to be negative, but I realize that there is a disconnect between the GIS technology and the Land and Survey Department, which I think should not be, because many times the property information may have changed over in the Land and Survey Department, and it's not updated on the nice spatial and aerial surveys that are over in the GIS department. I must admit, sometimes I bring that information across, and Mrs. Ryan is so helpful to integrate and overlay that information for us so that we can actually utilize it in what we do. So I'd like to encourage the government to provide us with the support and the resource, and if there's a way that they can seamlessly tie in that information so that when a map is updated at the Land and Survey Department, it is seamlessly transferred over to the GIS so that there's no interruption. I think that would help a lot in the work we do. And I would just like to encourage the GIS department to continue to do what they do, and we look forward to a more collaborative working environment with the GIS department. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Galloway, and we do look forward to working with you as well. We hope to advance some of those things you mentioned, like 3D modeling in the construction field and things like that. That would be really, really good to make sure that our buildings are built for our landscape. Yes. And we have gotten to our last presenter today. Last but certainly not least, our next presenter is Mrs. Delmaude Ryan. She holds a master's degree in international development, public policy and management from the University of Manchester in the UK. She currently serves as the projects and admin officer at the Montserrat National Trust, and the trust is mandated to protect, preserve, and enrich our natural and cultural heritage. Mrs. Ryan's role at the trust is to develop projects that embrace this mandate and oversee and assist with the implementation. There are currently 7 live projects with the focus of conservation, biodiversity and well-being, climate change, resilience, adaptation, and sustainability. Mrs. Ryan utilizes GIS technology at both the project proposal stage and the implementation stage. She uses this to improve success for grants and to optimize project outcomes. Please help me welcome Mrs. Delmaude Ryan.
Thank you very much, Laverne, and let me just say happy GIS Day to all of us in the profession. Although all the work is done by Laverne and her team. We just want to say thank you very much for having this useful resource for us in our various professions. And I know being at the Montserrat National Trust for the last 3 years, using GIS in our work is critical for us to be able to actually justify the projects that we write, and it does so much for us in the sense that, as I say, a picture speaks 1,000 words. It's a lot more than just looking at the data in tables, as Siobhan had mentioned earlier. And when we write to our external grant providers and they're asking for that evidence, it is through having those maps and the actual data that we utilize that we're able to justify the use of the funds or the funds that we're asking for. That has led to our successes so far. So this afternoon, while we eat, I'm going to take you through what we do at the Montserrat National Trust in relation to the projects that are live and how we integrate the GIS in our work. Next slide. So, as an outline, for those of you, I'll tell you a little bit about Montserrat National Trust, because it's interesting to know that
many of us in Montserrat still don't know a lot about the Montserrat National Trust, and I'll tell you a bit about it. What is GIS and its importance? And I'm going to ask you, who have been listening all morning, what is GIS when I get to that slide? And the application in GIS in biodiversity projects, looking at, for example, the sediment mapping and analysis, species distribution and analysis, conservation planning and development. Next slide, please. So the Montserrat National Trust, it is a non-government organization. We are located right below the Montserrat Secondary School over there on the Salem Main Road. As I said to the teachers we had last week, there's a lot more behind the walls. So you're welcome to visit the Montserrat National Trust to learn about Montserrat's heritage. It is where we document Montserrat natural and cultural heritage. So there are things that you'll find there in terms of our culture. And some of that is displayed at the Montserrat National Museum, as well as in terms of our biodiversity. You will see through the botanical gardens and other programs and projects that we have, how we bring this information alive for Montserrat's development. We actually have a policy of preservation, and we provide advice to the government, but we work very closely hand in hand with the Ministry of Agriculture, Lands, Housing, and the Environment. And based on what the projects are, individual departments under those ministries, we work hand in hand with them in the implementation. So most of our project teams, actually all of our project teams, have someone who represents either of any of the ministries based on that project. And so today I'm going to focus specifically on the conservation projects because there are other projects, but we're talking about how we use GIS in conservation. Next slide, please. Okay, so put it back. What is GIS for those of you? Can I get an answer quickly? We've heard it all morning. What is GIS? Not for you, Miss. It's for the young brains. What is GIS? Anybody know what GIS is? Geographical Information System. Okay, and what's an example of one of those you've heard this morning? What are the tools that they use? Like what? Remote sensing, and what else? Like what? Tools? All right, y'all guessing, and these wonderful presenters before us, they gave us all the beautiful pictures and videos and all the wonderful stuff that they do in their work, and you don't know what they do? All that fancy electronic car and bus and so on that we have in, and you don't know what? Oh, okay. All right, so let me tell you how we use it in conservation. It is very important because we deal with the environment, and in Montserrat, and even as you look at some of the pictures, it's very difficult to look afar and tell what's there. And so, I know when I got back to that specific spot, right? So with the GIS, it helps us in collecting the ecological data and at various levels, from high above, and you could go right down to the ground and even under, even in the water. So there are ways in which we can collect that data utilizing the GIS. And things like, you've heard a lot this morning about disaster risk and things like flooding. We've used that, and I'll show you in the examples coming up, how we're able to collect data to help inform projects and models that do with flooding in Montserrat. Okay, so I'm going to break them down in 3 parts. We're looking at the mapping and monitoring of the biodiversity species. We're going to be looking at species distribution and analysis, and conservation planning and development. So the projects that I'm going to speak to you about are going to be following under those categories. Okay, so in front of you, you're looking at a map of the Khassie catchment area. And if you were listening to speakers before me, that's one of the areas that is prone to what? Flooding. All right. And the map that you're seeing there is a project in which we assisted with informing other projects like the hydrology project and the marine resilience project. and environmental resilience projects, those were continuing. But this data and this map that you see in front of you, with the points at the bottom that are numbered, just as you've seen the houses numbered for census, indicate the various GPS points in which we are to collect specific data. Now, this sediment mapping, we were to go through that valley leading up from the Khassie along the different river streamlines, and we had to test the depth of the water. So there are times where we have to walk in water, and with that measure the size of the sediment, whatever rock that may be there, it could be sand, we have to go and measure that. We utilize another piece of GIS equipment or tool, which is the merging app. So through that merging app, when we go to a GPS point, which is randomly selected along the river lines as you're seeing there, that information now, whatever we see in that area at that point, we are to take those fixed pictures and then document the size of the rocks or whatever the sediment is in that area. We also document what we see in the habitat. For example, if there are iguanas, if there are birds. We also do a soil mapping, so information in terms of the topography of the soil that is there. It gives us information in relation to the runoff coming off from the flanks of the different guts as we go up that stream. And it tells in terms of the vegetation cover what areas are more prone for that water to rush in up that Khassie river line. So as you see, there are three almost four of them you can say, because these two on that side merges, and we have teams that go up the different streams and document that. Next slide, please. What you see here is what we see on the ground in terms of a fixed point. So if you were to look at point number 14, you're seeing a building. Anybody know where that is? On the flanks, on the banks. So we're looking at Delta right there. So that's looking at that gut outside NMB. And at point number 14, we will document the various information asked for that. Now, this information is then put into other data that is now analyzed to give further information in terms of how you would deal with the mitigation of the flooding in this area. So these are some of the things that we see. For this slide, is showing you the red ones. The red dots are those dots that are not, that area that is not surveyed. Some of the areas could not be surveyed based on where they were located, because for one thing with GPS, it's not going to tell you if you're falling off a cliff. So when you're actually on the ground, you can realize whether an area is risky or safe for you to go ahead and do your data collection. So this in terms of us doing the sediment documentation of the going up the river from the Khassie catchment area. The other aspect of GIS in our conservation is in relation to species distribution. And this is very important to help us to understand the variety of our ecological and geospatial. The data that comes from that tells us where certain species are in Montserrat. So the photo that you're seeing on your right is a picture capturing where data is collected for what we call from the iNaturalist app. Now, the iNaturalist app is used again from the phone, but is also using GIS in the sense that those dots you can actually look at if you're on the app, go to the specific dot and reveal what species is located at that particular site. It also reveals to you the name of that species, the location, everything is there, and it tells us the prevalence of various species. For example, if an area is filled with a lot of invasive plants, and that informs what it is that we will need to do. So far, we have documented 3,739 observations. We have 86 observers, and these could be anybody visiting Montserrat who has the iNaturalist app. So it's a citizen-friendly way in which we're able to collect data utilizing geographical information systems through our smartphones. And we have 86 observers who contribute to this. Next slide, please. So we also do, as part of the species mapping, and this map, sorry for the quality of it, but it is actually taken from using ArcGIS, where we are now doing a vegetation survey of around a dwelling house. So this is one of the properties who are on that project, the Adopt a Home for Wildlife project. And what we do, we survey those adopters' lots, and we identify the various species that may be found on their lots. Now, the points that are there are randomly selected GPS points, and we utilize our phones or utilizing our GPS instrument where we go directly to that point. Again, we have to take pictures of what we see north, south, east, west, and we compare those pictures now a year after. So we go back a year after to those very points, and then we compare the pictures to see were there any changes in the vegetation here in relation to what we have collected. Were there any changes in relation to the invertebrates that are on that particular site? And that helps to inform what is going on in terms of the health of the ecosystems in that particular area. The table at the bottom are the coordinates, so we put those coordinates in, and we make sure that they align with the dots that are there. And then generating from this, we come up with a species list, but also a management plan for that adopter to help them to find ways in which they can improve the vegetation and improve if there are issues where they're not having a lot of, for example, they're interested in pollinators around, inform them what are the best crops that could be planted in that area to increase pollinators in and around their property. So that is in terms of the Adopt a Home. The core role of that is to ensure that we reduce the invasive and increase with more native plants and plants that are our endemic, which is the pribi being one of them, that we encourage more of our people here to know the endemic plants and utilize them around their lots. Next slide, please. So this is an example of what happens when we're actually on the ground doing the survey. And in this regard, there are two persons, somebody's holding, the other is there. And we have a team of observers. In a 5-meter radius, we record all species of plants that we find in that 5-meter radius based on that GPS point. And that creates that list that tells us exactly what is there. When we come back a year after, we do the same thing. So this year we've gone through almost all of the resurveys. We're now at the point of doing the analysis to compare what the changes would have been over that period of time. So we utilize this GPS or GIS in the Adopt a Home for Wildlife project. We utilize it for BioBlitz projects where we do, in a short space of time, recording all the species that we can find, whether it's plant, animal species, in a short space of time in a specific geographical area. And we've done 2 BioBlitz so far on Montserrat. One was at the Montserrat National Trust, and the other one was over the summer at the Old Road Bay. And then our newest project, which is the Biodiversity and Wellbeing project, will utilize a similar methodology, but this now helps to inform persons like the developer. You've just heard before him how he utilized it to place it on the land, but now this is informing in relation to the type of vegetation that you have on the land and in terms of how you prepare in your construction. So one of the practices that we see is that when somebody is about to build, they clear the land, almost a whole year sometimes before they actually start building. And what happens is that you open up the risk of invasive taking over that area. And sometimes it's very hard to control them. So part of it is helping persons to understand, get the information about what they do when they're preparing, what type of plants they're encouraged to plant in the habitat area, because there are different habitats on Montserrat. Some plants are better in one area than the other. Some plants are better for dry areas than the other. So it's helping you to know the type of plants that would help with that, helping you to know again, in terms of, for example, I like using pollinators, what type of plants encourages certain things, even for farming. So one, I like to use the example of the stingless bees on Montserrat. Most of us don't know that we have stingless bees on Montserrat, or the bumblebees. And those bees are the main pollinators for avocados. So if you have plants that are rich in resin, then you know, we'll tell you what those plants are, what kind of plants you can have around to have a bumper crop of avocados. And we saw this year we had a bumper crop of avocados, which is telling us that we have an increase in the bumblebees on Montserrat. And that has one of the richest, finest honeys you can find. Next slide, please. So what you're seeing here is how we integrate the GIS in our planning and development. And you're looking at one of our newest areas, and this area is over in Fritz. And we are implementing a nature trail. So on this part of the lot, you're seeing the nature trail being mapped. We actually mapped the nature trail so we know exactly where we're going to place it in terms of safety, in terms of access, in terms of having less impact on the ecosystem and the biodiversity in that area. And we went as far as identifying exactly where we're going to be placing our signs, what type of species you'll be seeing in that area. So our key at the side will tell us various trees and stuff that we want to highlight on this trail. This trail is not yet open to the public, but it will be open around February, end of February, early March, connecting to the building, because there's a building aspect of it on the upper part of this trail. So this is an educational trail, which will be well labeled with what you're seeing, information about the type of birds and reptiles that live in the habitat, information about the trees that are there, and about the dry forest itself, and a good space for you to just sit and relax when you need a time off to connect with nature. And this is how we utilize the GIS. This plan was when we started doing the work and in laying out what we're going to do. But in terms of us being able to get this project, we had to generate a similar plan with the help of Laverne to show exactly where the path was going to take, what impact it was going to have on the vegetation, how we're going to mitigate in relation to that. So one of the things we had to do for this project again was do one of those biodiversity surveys to see what plants will be affected if we have to clear a particular, on the path that we are taking, what plants will be affected, what plants we would need to replace, where we will replace them on the lot. And all of this is important in terms of the project writing and justifying how you are going to be utilizing the funds to support things like improving our biodiversity in Montserrat. And this is one of the rare dry forest areas on Montserrat. Next slide. So one of the, moving on again in terms of how we utilize the plans and the GIS, you're looking now at the Montserrat National Trust Botanical Garden, and you notice that it's labeled current. So Mr. Galloway mentioned before the importance of having up-to-date data in terms of the lands. When we submitted our plans, they asked specifically, where are you going to be doing? What's the difference between what you have now? Where are you going to be making these changes? We spoke about the new areas and the expansion of the garden, but the plan that we had was outdated. So we needed to get a current plan in the justification. So after we got through round one, they wanted to get this information round two. exactly where you're going to have this. So we needed to come up with a plan. And again, this is where the GIS mapping, lands, and survey information interacts to help us to be able to get or justify the means for these projects. And currently, this is the layout of the Montserrat National Trust. The blue areas are showing where the land, where the Trust Botanical Gardens have now extended since it has been developed in way back then. Next slide, please. Okay, so in conclusion, you see that the GIS technology is very important for our biodiversity. It helps us with our mapping, analyzing and monitoring, modeling, and really helps us to make informed decisions in relation to where things grow, where things are planted around your yards, or even across Montserrat, and where things are threatened. So we're able to see too where things are threatened. And we do a whole lot more. This is just a tip of the iceberg of things that we do right now at the Montserrat National Trust. There are other projects in which we collaborate with the Department of Environment, one being the Seabird Monitoring Project, and in that light we utilize the DOE drone to help us to actually spot where seabirds are nesting on the cliff. You can understand with your bare eyes and even with the binoculars, you're not able to see where a bird may be nesting, but by having the drones, we're able to go right in, see exactly where the birds are nesting, see if they are threatened by anything, and help us to understand what's going on in terms of the habitat in which they are in. So the use of GIS is so crucial to the work that we do, and it makes it a whole lot easier for us. So thanks again to the GIS team and to the ministry and the department for allowing us this very valuable system for us. Thank you very much. Thank you. Next slide. Any questions? Yes, you want a question on that? Okay, that's our new EcoPlay building that we're hoping to get planning approval for very soon. We're going through the process. This building will be right on the corner when you leave from the Montserrat Secondary School. That's our EcoPlay Park building, which is designated to help our whole families and Montserrat and visitors have a safe space, but a place where they can learn about our natural history and about our biodiversity and do lots of activities in that regard. And we are raising funds for it, so you can. You can make your contributions to the Montserrat National Trust. We still need to reach that $800,000 figure. Now we may probably have to put an inflation price tag on it, but you can make your contributions to the Montserrat National Trust individually as a group. You can. Any questions? Okay, so I think I've done well, and I hope that you will enjoy your lunch.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Ryan. And thank you so much for being engaged and to stay with us. We're now at the end of our presentation activities. I hope that you have learned something new. Can I get a hand up? All right, that looks good. So thank you once again for participating. I hope you have seen the synergies between what each presenter does and how that work interrelates with each other, from disaster management to census to hazard risk and vulnerability to road development to, what am I missing? Conservation and biodiversity, and which one am I missing? Yes, construction. Right, so thank you so much. If you do have any further questions or you want to see something, you feel free to come into the GIS department. We're happy to show you. If you have new ideas that we can develop on Montserrat, that's welcome as well. And I look forward to seeing some participant here as one of our next GIS managers, possibly, or even taking that path toward GIS analysis, data scientists, that sort of thing. I hope you have been inspired. Have you been inspired? Yes. And I look forward to seeing you again next year And for now, happy GIS Day. Thank you so much. For those of you who haven't seen, we do have a GIS Day cake up front. So that's coming up. GIS is sweet. You want to ensure that you taste the sweetness of GIS. And before you run off, if you can get a group picture, please, I'll be very grateful. Okay, thank you so very much. If you want to have a peek at the cake, and then we can, Mrs. Benz, are you available to cut?